It's my pleasure to introduce to you today Gene Yang, author of American-Born Chinese, published in 2006 by First Second. It was the first graphic novel to be nominated for a National Book Award, and has recently been included in the Best American Comics of 2008 anthology. Please join me in welcoming Gene Yang.
Thank you very much for being here. Can you hear me? Is this working? It is working, right? Thank you very much for being here. This is what I'd like to do. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit more about myself. Then I'd like to talk about why anybody would want to actually draw comic books. And finally, I'd like to end with a short reading out of American-Born Chinese, and I'll talk a little bit about where some of the ideas behind that story came from. So first, I have two different jobs. I like to tell people that I'm like Batman. Batman has two different jobs. He's a billionaire by day and a crime fighter by night. I am a teacher by day and a cartoonist by night. I am the son of two immigrants. My father was born in Taiwan and my mom in mainland China. They came to the United States for graduate school, met at a library, and fell in love, got married, and had me. Growing up, one of the primary ways that I interacted with my parents was through storytelling. They loved to tell me stories. My dad would mostly make up these stories off the top of his head. And usually they were about a young Taiwanese village boy named Atong. My favorite Atong stories were all about these crazy chores that Atong's dad would make him do. For instance, there's one story where Atong's dad made him go to the front of their house and pick up cow manure with a pair of chopsticks and a rice bowl. And I thought that was the most hilarious thing in the world. Now, looking back on these stories of my dad's as an adult, I came to a realization. I think he was telling me these stories to get me to be grateful that he wasn't making me do those same sorts of chores. Of all of my mom's stories, my favorite were about the Monkey King. So how many of you have heard of the Monkey King? So most of you have heard of the Monkey King. That's awesome. The Monkey King is an amazing character. In Asia, he actually fits this really interesting, he's a really interesting part of the culture. I don't know if we have an equivalent. He is both a literary figure like Hamlet and a popular figure like Mickey Mouse. So his story was originally told in this novel written several hundred years ago called Journey to the West. And that novel is considered one of the four pillars of Chinese literature. But at the same time, he shows up on lunchboxes, he shows up on Saturday morning cartoons, he shows up in comics, so he's very much a popular figure as well. For a 5- or 6-year-old boy, there are many, many things about the Monkey King that appeal. Number one, he's a monkey, and number two, he does kung fu, so he's a kung fu monkey. He also has superpowers like American superheroes. He can call down a cloud from the sky and ride it around like a skateboard. He can grow and shrink with the slightest thought. And my favorite when I was little, he has this giant magic stick that he beats people with. So this stick, just like him, can grow and shrink with his slightest thought. So he normally keeps it about the size of a toothpick tucked behind his ear, and then when he meets the fight, he pulls it out and he thinks about it, and it becomes this staff. So it's amazing. Now, I grew up listening to stories. I also grew up drawing. My mom tells me that I started drawing when I was about 2 years old. So naturally, when you take stories and drawing and add them together, you get animation. This was the very first form of drawn storytelling that I was exposed to. And I think that's true for a lot of kids in this culture as well. You know, when we think of drawn storytelling, the first thing that comes to mind are Disney movies and those sorts of things, and Saturday morning cartoons. I grew up wanting to become a Disney animator. I had expected after I graduated college to go and find a job at the Disney studios. In 3rd grade, we were asked to do these biography reports. I did mine on Walt Disney, and pretty soon after, I became obsessed with him. I would check out all the books from my library that I could find about Walt Disney. I would have stalked him if he had still been alive. I also had this giant poster of Walt Disney's head hanging in my bedroom. Not his drawings, but his actual head. My friends would come over, you know, and hang out, and they look at it and they go, "Why do you have a picture of a creepy old man hanging in your bedroom?" And I'd have to explain to them, that's not just any creepy old man, that's Walt Disney. So I grew up wanting to become an animator. In 5th grade, this all changed on a trip to a local bookstore. My mom took me to a local bookstore. Back in the day, in bookstores, they had these things called spinner racks, which were wireframe racks that carried individual monthly issues of comic books, and you could spin them to see all of them. So I'd noticed them before, but for some reason on this particular trip, this issue of Marvel 2-in-1 caught my eye. I saw this, I found this cover amazingly intriguing. I brought this up to my mom and I said, "Mom, please let me buy this comic." And she said, "No, absolutely not. Those two characters on the cover look really, really scary, and if you read that book, you'll just get nightmares." So she made me put it back. I was really sulky. So instead, she bought me this. This was the latest issue of Superman. Now, Superman is every parent's favorite superhero. First, unlike the Thing and Rom, he's not scary looking at all. He's actually pretty good looking. Second, he wears, bright primary colors. And third, he always does the right thing. He's like this giant flying Boy Scout. This book really got comics under my skin. It demonstrated for me how this combination of words and pictures could really achieve effects that neither words nor pictures could achieve alone. American-Born Chinese tells 3 different stories that are thematically related. The first one is a retelling of those Monkey King stories that my mom told me when I was young. The second one is about Jin Wang, who's a young Chinese-American boy growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood. And the last one is a sitcom on paper starring Cousin Chinky, who's this amalgamation of all the different Chinese and Asian stereotypes that I could think of.